And today I'll be briefing you over field training. Alright, the main purpose of field training is to evaluate cadets for potential entry into the professional officer course. So after you're at 200, you complete FTP, you want to go to field training, succeed, and do well. Come back, you're a POC, great. Alright, this will, like I said, this will take place the summer of your junior year. So right before you come back as a junior. Alright, it'll last approximately 26 days. And you will attend one of the 5 maximum spreads throughout the summer. So in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Everybody wants max 1, but it's not guaranteed. Alright, so the first part of field training, it'll be in garrison. It is the first 11 days of field training. The first 11 days. This tests you on drill and ceremony, warrior knowledge, protocol, team building, and general leadership. So that's the first 11 days of field training. The second part of field training is called AEF, which stands for Air Expeditionary Forces. This simulates a deployed environment. Is the next 14 days of field training. This teaches you deployment-related skills such as convoys, room clearing, and small unit tactics. This concludes my briefing. Are there any questions?
So I'll let Captain Brown introduce herself first.
So I'm Captain Brown, public health officer. So we kind of roll with deployment. So anyone that's going pretty close to deployment, they have to come to my house to make sure that they are medically cleared to go. We do reportable diseases, communicable disease, so any type of disease surveillance, outbreaks, we deal with that. We do food and facility inspections on base. Occupational health, so anyone that is exposed to some type of exposure occupationally on their job, we make sure that they get the right exams. We do, for our pilots, we do our hearing exams. So really a jack of all trades. We have our hands literally everything across the installation, which makes my job awesome because I get to interact with CE, I interact with the wing, I interact with public affairs, so depending upon what's going on, it dictates who I'm working with. So the other side has to do infection prevention, so making sure within the clinic that all of our surgical procedures that we do, they're only minor because we're a small clinic, but making sure that we are keeping our patients healthy and that we're not giving them any type of infection when they come in. So our kind of do surveillance month to month to make sure that our doctors are practicing within their scope and that we're taking care of all of our patients, active duty dependents, retirees.
Awesome. So I'm Lieutenant Garces. I'm a bioenvironmental engineer. And we are kind of the left hand of public health, and public health is the right hand. I can describe my job in basically 2 different domains. We do health risk assessments on one side, and we do emergency response on the other side. So our health risk assessment side, it's very similar to what Captain Brown does, except we deal with ventilation. We also do a little bit of occupational health, where we go out to certain shops around the installation, and then we check them for their equipment, make sure that what their gear is protecting them. But the exciting side of my job is the emergency response. So that's where I get to go out and respond with the fire department. And if you've ever seen those folks that wear the disease containment bubble suits, that's us. We're the ones that go and respond to oil spills, chemical spills, any sort of radiological incidents, any sort of explosive incidents. I know that we kind of share that with EOD, but they're the experts on it, but we do have some equipment that will help us in detection of those type of materials. But that's basically my job in a nutshell. So we're kind of the black sheep of the medical group, because I'm not a doctor and I'm certainly not a nurse. So it's just, we don't see patients all the time, but we're still medical. So
We'll keep you guys.
yes, thank you.
Captain Morgan, I'm the staff pediatrician, 44K3 by AFSC. I'm also the clinical medicine flight commander, so I'm in charge of 3 other elements on top of my primary job. Pretty much I take care of anyone from birth to about 23 technically, and that includes active duty airmen from time to time, when we're short staffed. But other than that, it's my job in a nutshell, really. It's pretty straightforward.
I'm Lieutenant Havermeyer. I am a nurse. So we're all from Vance Air Force Base. So right now we're family health, and then with peds, they're all kind of the same float back and forth. So everyone knows what a nurse does, so that's easier. They have the cool job.
Don't downplay it.
I like it. I'll keep it. That's basic. Do you guys have questions? Air Force, medical side, anything else you'd like to know?
She's a joint spouse as well, so if
I
there's
am.
anyone who's in that bucket possibly, she might have
Yeah.
answers for you as well.
My
I gotta
husband
get-
is a pilot, and then so I'm a nurse.
Just go ahead. You raise your
Question.
hand.
So, how often do you work with civilians? Do you have civilians that you work with a lot, like with nursing or whatever you all do?
I feel like Vance is special because we have tons of civilians and contractors. When this market is based, we didn't have as many, especially contractors in GS. It was a lot more active duty. But we have our Vances, and so civilians and contractors they're definitely one of them.
On the bio side, we have, in the civilian sector, they're called industrial hygienists, and so they are basically the civilian counterparts of us, but they don't respond with us, but they basically do all of our occupational health risk assessments alongside with us.
And on our side, at Vance, we have a lot of civilian nurses. I think we have two in the clinic. Where I just came from, I was at a hospital at Keesler, and we didn't have any civilians. So it kind of depends base to base, the needs of that base, what they need, and then specific jobs. It's easier to take civilians, and if we need them, if we don't have, spots for active duty members. So.
What else we got?
Well, there was I have a different question that we can get to later, but on the on deployments, do you see a lot of different, at least in pace or in the type of things that you're treating? Do you notice a large difference, or is it kind of like, well, it's just hot and dry over here?
So I've never been deployed, but I can pretty much guarantee you, people I know who've been deployed, other physicians, yeah, what you do here is pretty much your basic care, and you're always preparing for what's on the other side. So getting deployed many times, at least for a physician, what we read about in books, that's what you see. You see things that you almost never would see because many places are not industrialized, and so you're seeing diseases, you're seeing accidents, you're seeing casualties, of any age group, from either IEDs or bullet wounds or whatever. So you're seeing a lot different. It's more traumatic based, kind of going out and trying to render care versus kind of preventative, where we're kind of just preparing for the time. I can't speak for them, but it's more reactive when you're out there. You're just trying to handle the situation, get a grip, and keep moving forward. Here we're kind of just playing around, doing our normal day-to-day things. So.
I've never been deployed, but I know that if bio deploys, we form with public health PAM team, preventive medicine.
It's a flight doc, it's a bioenvironmental engineer, it's a public health officer.
And I mean, I'm sure you're all well aware that deployed locations are nothing like here in the United States. There's so many unknowns, so we do what's called the site assessments, where we'll have to go and basically start from scratch. What is their soil like? What is their water like? And so we're constantly moving. The tempo is definitely much higher than a deployed location for us as well.
And the same for nursing. It depends how you deploy. You can deploy, and you can be in a clinic working wherever you deploy. You can be in a forward operating base. You could be in a hospital type thing. It really depends on your type of specialty and where you are deploying. You can be setting up all the tents, working through those. You can be getting people already. You can be flight nursing. So it really depends where you're deployed to, what type of nurse you are, and that type of setting.
What else? Anything else?
So the relationship in, I don't know, like an office or wherever, do you refer to each other as like doctors and nurses, or is it sir, ma'am, captain, lieutenant? Like, what's common? Is it just kind of depends on the person? And also that ties into another question: is how many Captain Morty jokes do you hear?
Frequent enough that if I could make any money off of it, I'd probably retire. But no, I mean, for me, it's very unique because in the medical corps, compared to anywhere else, it's a much closer, your personal space. Most individuals just kind of either like, just doc, nurse, or even first name. I mean, literally, because you're having to deal with situations that you can't deal with formalities all the time. When you need to get something done, you can't be like, oh, Captain Haywire, can you go get this, and this? Like, Molly, I need this. You know, and it gets people's attention a little easier. It's short, but we try to remember the courtesies because you are in the military, and it is that uniqueness. Like, I have individuals that I work with as the pediatrician and as physician, like, hey doc, can we do this or that? But when it comes down to something comes up, I can easily know what they're asking. They're like, Captain Morgan has a question. That's asking me as a officer, as a supervisor, versus hey doc. And I think that's probably more medical. So it's a little different, and it's gotten the medical corps in trouble from time to time because, you know, we are casual. We know we have to work with each other in a more intimate manner, and so, you know, you have to be careful with that. I can't speak for like personnel or flyers, but I can guarantee you a lot of times when you get close enough and you work with someone, you kind of get a little more personal, but you have to keep that professionalism out there. And that's the hard thing, because there's people that you work with who are the same age as you, but they're a stripe versus an officer, so it makes it very difficult. And they may know more on their side, and you respect them for that, but you can't do certain things with them. So, you know, you have to kind of balance that. You know, hey, it'd be nice to go out and hang out with you, but you can't do that. Like for me, we're such a small base, I literally cannot hang out with anyone, literally no one. And that's, you know, because everyone I work with, I'm their supervisor. And if I wasn't the supervisor, I had to be careful anyway, as a physician and nurse relationship, or a technician, you know, so I had to kind of go out and find people to kind of hang out with. So, you know, we're so small, you have to like try to get out of that realm. But it's unique, it really is. You just, you know, gotta remember to keep your cover and make sure you know, run the rules.
It's a little bit more relaxed once you're active duty, I think, as opposed to when I was going through ROTC. I know that it's very, you know, strict on the customs and courtesies, and there's a reason for it, you know, getting taught that. But once you guys are all, you know, active duty and you get to work with the people that you work with, then it gets a little bit more relaxed. And
It certainly takes some time to get used to, but I mean, I can speak for, I believe, all four of us. I mean, when we go and speak to the line side, we know that we can't, just because we operate in the medical field, the way they interact with their technicians and their airmen and their supervisors, we're not going to act the same way. So we know that we have to render the same military customs and courtesies with them. So it's just a different world, line side versus medical.
Even medical's different. I mean, they're different than I am. Because the medical corps is not like the DSC or MSC or nurse corps. I mean, so there's even differences in that. So it gets very convoluted, very complex. And, you know, you just gotta have fun with it and laugh at each of your career fields. Because if you don't, I mean, we're literally medical group. We're even medical corps. We're like the redheaded stepchild, the black sheep. I mean, everyone makes fun of the medical, you know, group of physicians. So it's always, you know, you just gotta have fun with it. You gotta make fun of yourself in life. Life's too short not to have fun. What else? Any other questions?
Are there any big differences between the medical field and the Air Force compared to the civilian side?
Yeah, there's a lot. The lifestyle, the work, you know, even the specialties, like where I'm at in the military, everyone gets paid the same. You know, it's all rank and time grade, so it's the same. But where I work, I might work right now 60, 65 hours a week. But I have colleagues who are pushing 80, maybe 100-hour weeks. We all get paid the same. Civilian side, not so. If I'm working, seeing 15, 20 people, I might make X amount, but my colleagues who see twice as many, they get paid twice as much. So there's a huge difference on that side of it. But, you know, I love what I do, and I wouldn't change it. So that's what matters. You got to be passionate about what you guys choose. Don't go in for the money. Don't go in for the prestige, because you'll burn out or not like it. Go in for it because you love it. And I promise you, you'll be happy with your career choice.
I'm gonna say for me, for like public health, like I said, we get to do so much. So over 15, 16 different programs on the civilian side. If I was public health, I would be over one program, and that would be my job. So I would be in food safety, or I'd be in communicable diseases, and that's it. But in the Air Force, I had the opportunity of working different programs to where if I decide to get out or retire, I have a stacked resume, which is awesome. You don't get experience like this on the civilian side, you really don't. So.
And what was your major for public health?
I did a Master's of Public Health focusing on global health.
Bio.
Biology. However, I guess we should talk about how to get into our career fields. That might help.
Yeah.
So I'll start, since I think it might be the easiest to get into bio out of all of the career fields, because I didn't have to go to medical school, and I only needed a bachelor's. I think you have to have a master's to go into public health. But to come into bio, all you need is honestly a science degree or an engineering degree. And it used to be more strict, but now if you have a science degree or a engineering degree, you can come and do bioenvironmental engineering. But basically what happens is during your guys' junior year, you'll, I know that some of you might be seniors, but so it's not too late if you still want to come to bio. But what happens is you'll go through an interview process and you get select. Do you guys have like a medical rep or someone that helps you like transition from being a cadet to, that might be knowledgeable of?
We could probably ask that Tom, but
Because someone, well, at least how it was for me, there was an individual that helped me go through the interview process and the application process, and it's called ascending into, at least for bio career field, you ascend into these career fields in ascension. Because originally when I was a senior, I was supposed to go into space operations, believe it or not, and then they had me ascend into the bioenvironmental engineering career field. But it's an application process. You go through an interview. All you need is a bachelor's, so it's not too terrible. And we're looking for people, so if you want to come by, then please let me know.
When I came in, I was already in grad school when I commissioned, so I came through the Health Profession Scholarship Program, so I knew nothing about the military aside from my parents both being retired Army enlisted. So I was in grad school and decided I want to join the Air Force and do something greater than, what I'm doing right now, going to school and being broke in New Orleans. So I applied for the scholarship, and right after I graduated, I commissioned and came on active duty. And so for public health, you have to have a master's in public health in order to commission into our career field.
Shocker, to be a nurse, you need a nursing degree. I did do ROTC, so I did ROTC and did nursing school at the same time, and then came in as a nurse. It's probably easier than bio. Take the easy kick on that, but you can come in as a DNP if you want to be like a nurse practitioner. We use nurse practitioners. You can be lots of different types of nursing, specializing. I don't know, are any of you guys looking at medical or in the process of that? Yeah.
If not, we're not offended.
Yeah, no.
We're not.
So I came in, there's just any type of nursing you can do. You asked about like difference in civilian. You come in and you get trained in a medical hospital. So you automatically, your first 3 years, you're in a hospital learning. You get to do either med surg or you do OB. And then you can specialize into any type of nursing you'd like. So that was a really big plus for me. And yeah, that's how I became a nurse in the Air Force.
For mine's more of a convoluted story. I originally was going to go into either spec ops, OSI, and I was originally doing my bachelor's in analytical forensic science, chemistry, and criminal justice, and master's in criminal justice. And then my wife said, no, you're not going to do that. I said, yes, ma'am, and so went to medical. I always had an interest in medical, but really I didn't think I was smart enough. And really, I had to have someone kind of push me and say, no, you can do it. But I did. I switched over. I had basically a pre-med degree already based on all the classes I took from undergrad. And it's 4 year for undergrad, 4 year for medical school. My residency was 3 years. So you add all of you're at least looking at 11 years. There are some combined programs where you can kind of shorten down your med school and undergrad. I think it's like 5 to 6 years in school. But that got me in, and I did HPSP as well to get in as a position. So for us, we were commissioned, go into second lieutenant while you're in medical school. As soon as you graduate, you go to 03 captain, and then you're everything's for the medical course pre-done. As long as you don't kill anyone or do anything stupid, you get promoted. Because the physicians are hard to keep in the military.
don't screw up.
Yeah, yeah. So no, I've already made my major slick, so I've been on in April. So, but yeah, it's whatever you guys want to make of your education. Just
real questions in the Air Force or anything.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any tips for people going right in? Like,
Like the butter bar?
yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
I guess I can speak to that.
I guess that was one.
I mean, mine's literally like just a few second sentence. Know you're enlisted, respect your enlisted. They will take care of you if you respect them. And I don't care if they're two-stripe or they've got chevrons on top. Just respect your enlisted. They know how things really work. Officers, your job is basically to supervise and ensure things are getting done. But they're the grunts. They work. And so if you respect them and make sure that you take care of them, they're going to take care of you. So that would be my advice, is just get in there. Don't be a revolutionist. Kind of, hey, get to your NCO or senior and say, hey, how things going to go around here? Can you help me out? Guarantee they're going to be, all right, yeah, no problem. What can I do for you? They'd be so much fun. That'd be my advice.
Find a really good senior NCO. If you have a really strong senior NCO, being a lieutenant is easy, because they will say, come here, lieutenant, I will guide you the right way. That's what happened to me, seriously. They will guide you and they will lead you and they will help groom you into a great officer, along with whatever flight commander you have. But a senior NCO, an awesome one, will do right by you, seriously.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my story is I came into Peterson and I was just a brand new butter bar. I had no idea, because I hadn't gone through technical training yet for bio. So I had to look for that senior NCO, and you make decisions as an officer right up from the get-go, and he was just able to pull me aside and be like, you know, like that probably wasn't the right thing to do. So here, why don't you? They'll help you out, and it's always an experience. But just looking for that senior NCO, I can't trust your enlisted. I had one stripers and two stripers that knew like miles ahead of what I knew as a butter bar just going into bio, and they helped me and pulled me along the way. I can't speak enough. Our enlisted force is awesome. They really are. So just respect them, treat them right, and they'll take care of you. They really will.
I'd also say embrace being a butter bar. It's, you know, you come right in and you're just like, oh, I can't wait to be like that higher grade. When you're a lieutenant, you kind of can get a free pass. You can kind of be like, I don't know what this is. Like in acronyms, people throw acronyms and everything at you. Speak up. Be like, I really would love if you could explain that a little bit more. Because the higher up you get, the less chances you get to say that. Like, so I'm still gonna, you know, take advantage of my lieutenant part. Ask him all the questions I can, and just know that it's okay to not know what you're doing a little bit. Know who to ask, know where to go, that type of thing, and you know.
And be proactive too. I remember I knew nothing about writing DPRs and just trying to get in there, and they're like, well, the LT doesn't understand it, what's going on in DPRs. The wing commander is probably not going to understand it either. So it's just one of those things, like trying to be proactive, get in there, understand, you know, how your shop runs. And it's, after that, your flight will take care of you.
So I graduated from here a year ago. I work on an air launch cruise missile. I'm an engineer on the hardware team. I do several service line extension programs and lots of other brand engineering jobs that I can talk about if you want, or anything about anything to do within the Air Force. But I'm a tinker and I should be here about the next 3 years.
My name is Bill Branco. I'm an aircraft maintenance officer. 2009 graduate from the University of Nebraska. Been to, this is my third duty station. Been overseas a couple times. Enjoying everywhere.
Lieutenant Robert Jones. So I've been prior listed. This is my 14-year-old. So I'm newly commissioned. So I have a little different perspective than these guys. Project management at D152 School, working on weapons program, weapons demonstration. So I'd like to ask you guys, what are you guys also careers or jobs? You guys know your jobs already? No?
Some do, half and half.
Okay, so for you that know your jobs, what are you guys doing?
I got a UPT next year.
Okay. Anybody else?
Plus,
Just you? Space ops? Space ops, okay.
You don't need to do space ops.
Engineer. Astronaut. Whatever that means.
equipment's good, making sure that their home life is good, because when an individual walks out and starts working on your equipment, you want them to have a sound mind, right? You want them to be confident in what they're doing, so that's kind of what we make sure that they do. Any questions?
Yeah, you guys want to know about? Just kidding. You know what you guys want to know? You guys have any questions? You just want to talk about our jobs, or?
How's it like managing a project that you might not see all the way through because you're PCS every 3 years? How's that like turnover?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So most projects you'll get in charge of are like, at least, so at the B52 SPO, most of our projects are maintenance projects. So they're like 10 years long, things like that. You'll jump in, you'll be midway through a project. So I'm on a demonstration project, a 4-year rapid acquisition demonstration project. I jumped on, it took me probably 2 months to get acclimated to the project, just to figure out who's who are the contractors, where's the money coming from, things like that. And I'll leave before this demonstration even finishes. So you just jump in, do the best you can, and make sure that whoever's coming to replace you, they know 100% spun up before you head out. Just being involved in the project at all is fun. So just get spun up as quick as you can. That's probably the hardest part. And then leaving the project, you can always call back later and be like, hey, was the project successful? Was the demonstration successful? But that's going to happen probably for most of the projects that you get involved with, unless you get on, rapid, quick demonstration projects and things like that. There you go.
How do you keep morale high for the enlistment units?
Tough, a little bit. Because they're working hard, they're working long hours. So it's bringing in different, I don't know what to call it, fun things, but events that inspire them a little bit. I think Rob can kind of talk to it, being on that side.
Yeah.
Seeing it. It's tough, though. It is really tough, but it's not unachievable. So it's about interacting with individuals and creating a personal relationship with as many as you can, so that you can see when maybe they're at a bad week, or you can do something about it. Get involved, you can see the problems.
Yeah, I think from my experience, there's a disconnect a lot of times between what the maintenance guys and the enlisted want and what how the O's look at us and like, hey, we'll do this, it'll be great for the morale, we'll put on a barbecue or something like that. When, I mean, one of the things that young guys want, they want time off as much as they can. And that's one of the main things, time off, and you try to build camaraderie between them as much as you can as well. A lot of the times, if you don't force people to be together and like enjoy themselves, they won't do it. So you'll hear a lot of pushback, like, I don't want to stay late and go to that event. I don't want to stay and do that. I've already worked 12 hours. But if you don't force them to do that, then they're not going to do it, and there's not going to be that camaraderie. So a lot of times, you kind of have to force the fun upon them, but you also have to make it fun for them and make events enjoyable for them. That and giving them time off when you can. Make sure you got all their stuff done. And you're giving them time off when you can. So that's what kids want usually. I mean, you can't give them money, you can't give them things like that. So the other big thing is they don't realize it early on, but putting them in for awards packages, or getting them recognized is a really big thing. I know I enjoyed it. I never spoke about like, hey, if you put me in for an award or I like to be recognized, no one's going to say they do, but when you get up there in front of the audience, you get an award, you get recognized for a quarterly or annual award. That's always a good feeling. So if you're high performers, make sure you get them recognized. That's a big thing. Team awards, quarterly awards, annual awards. Staying on top of that is really good.
I'm a program manager also. They probably filled in most of what we do. I work with Lieutenant Anderson in the Air Launch Cruise Missile Program Office doing cost schedule performance. So we have a super old, broken, terrible missile that carries a nuclear warhead. So it's our job to make sure that it's officers to put together a package to go out to industry and find people or to our depot level, other Air Force guys that can make sure the part does what it's supposed to do. That includes, one of the biggest things that we do in our office is securing funding to be able to do that. So putting together funding requirements, briefing the people in the Pentagon that go up ultimately to Congress and do that. Engineers, business.
Space guys.
Couple space guys. So I'll talk a little bit about space. I did 4 years at Shreveport Air Force Base in Colorado Springs. So I actually did a program called Operational Exchange, here called OPEX. So I commissioned straight out of Det 670. I went to Shreveport Air Force Base, coded as a 13 Sierra. So I actually filled a space billet while I was there. I worked with GPS satellites for all 4 years while I was there doing command and control. So went out to Vandenberg, did the initial space training, went to Shreveport Air Force Base and did a little bit more training. Sat on a crew rotation for 2 years. Went to the analysis shop there and played as the chief of the analysis shop, kind of interfacing with contractor support, Boeing and Lockheed Martin that made the specific blocks of GPS, and then transitioned to the SAN eval section and helped write some of the evaluation material that they used, and then transitioned to program management from there.
I guess I have just a couple questions. How did you like Shreveport and why did you transition?
So when I graduated this Operation Exchange program, I graduated with a hard coded as a 6.3 as a program manager. This OPEX program is a career broadening program, kind of like he's on, where they allow you to kind of go outside of your career field to get some, no kidding, operational experience. And Jay can talk a little bit about coming straight out of ROTC and being put into a program office where we work. It's very separated from how the typical Air Force environment looks, right? So the typical Air Force, kind of like you're used to in ROTC, right? A little bit more day-to-day grind, kind of doing some of that stuff. Whereas our program office is like 95 civilians and 5 military, very removed, very laid back. We don't have formal PT, very laid back. So it kind of gives you a chance to see what the real Air Force is like, what that operations career field looks like. So, if you're in a flying squadron, if you're doing maintenance, the ops tempo that you're doing is much different than most program management offices. So, loved Colorado Springs, absolutely loved it. It was a great assignment. Shreveport Air Force Base is kind of out of Colorado Springs a little way, but most people live in Colorado Springs. Beautiful area, fantastic people, very high ops tempo. All of the space is very high ops tempo. Not a lot of travel. You're there, you go home. A lot of crew rotations. A lot of changes recently to the space career field, making there was for a long time you were an operator and then you kind of transitioned to staff level jobs, and they're getting back to making you an operator and then bringing you to staff and kind of making that rotation back and forth, which I think is a great thing. Most people remember understand this, but space is going to be big in the future. It's not going to go anywhere. I think the space career field is an excellent career field. They recently have started sending space coded guys to weapons school. So we're treating it like a kidding weapons system. It's the future. It's good. So it's my opinion.
So what else?
So when you transition to full active duty life, what common misconceptions do you feel like you encountered? Or maybe people from our end, like misconceptions that we might have about what it's like to be an active duty officer?
I think the first thing you need to do when you come in is be great on lot of people have been doing it a lot longer than you have, obviously. So, take a piece of humble pie, 'cause you're gonna walk out these doors pretty excited, pretty, I don't know how long they're gonna be in, just walk through the next step. So, listen to those CEOs, or maybe, if you're flying in, listen to the captains that are tugging around for a little while. But don't walk in with your guns blazing. Back down very quick.
I would say be prepared to study similar, whatever career field you're going to go into. ROTC is preparing you to be an officer. It's not training you how to do a specific job. So you're going to go to whatever your tech school is, whatever your training is, and you need to come out of the gate ready to learn how to do your job. I think that was one of the bigger shocks for me was I finished school, I'm going to go be an officer, and it's like, whoa, now I'm back in class 8 hours a day and studying at night.
So I made a little list of things I wish I knew and things that I've learned. So the first one is, I wish I knew that my pay might get messed up when I first joined.
Yeah.
So my first paycheck was for $7. My second paycheck was for $100. So it took 2 months for me to get a full paycheck. So I wish I'd have known to put aside like 2 months of rent. The other thing was have someone explain the mysterious Air Force portal to you. There's about 100 different links and how to update your ADP, which is where you want to go after you leave the current base. Write down everything you do because there's 14 lines on an OPR, and I don't know about you guys, but I had to write my own. It's sort of hard to find 14 significant things that are on an OPR. So write down everything you do. You might travel a lot. You might not also, but I was gone for 3 of the last 12 months DUI. So I had no idea that was going to happen. If you work with a bunch of civilians and for civilians, put yourself in for awards and look out for you because they don't really consider the military side of things. Have military camaraderie with the military that are in your community to look like civilians. Join a church, club, or something. Have a life outside of work. And talk to the education office soon about going to get your master's and getting that paid for. And then have fun. So you're going to have a lot of responsibility. More than anybody outside the military at a young age, you just enjoy it. And then, like the captain said, don't forget your second lieutenant. So you still have a lot to learn. I can go again. What else?
Are any of your jobs you had to like apply for, like interview for type of things?
No. I mean, you boarded just like the older guys did. So, once you get in and you get into your job, there will be things you have to apply for if you want to. Critical runnings, you have to apply for that, right? Yeah. So, critical running, speed, any of those things you got to apply for. And outside of going through the typical application where it's going or interview.
I mean, you interview for like a CAG or ESAC or something like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes special programs, captain that works here. Yeah, so he applied for a program called the GHOST program. That would have an interview component, but most of us is. Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, I just know that when we talked to the bioengineer guy out there, he's like, yeah, you had to apply for an interview for his career. So I don't know.
Yeah, so there are, especially if you're going to do a Black World program, something that's like classified by nature, a lot of times they'll have you, if you're going to work for their NRO or something like that, they'll have an interview process, so that kind of stuff. Do any of you guys have your jobs yet?
Woohoo!
Where are you here? Cool. Sandy Land.
I have finance.
Cool. You don't know where you're going though, right?
Nope.
Did you pick this also?
Yes.
That's why I'm just curious. Not this one, so. Do you like the noise?
I do. I like the being in the middle of nowhere and the opportunity for like nurture. And I like my master's.
That's a good way to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So for Lieutenant Anderson, you said when you're working with civilians, put yourself in for awards?
So quarterly awards and anything like that, they have no idea that happens.
How does that work? I guess that's the award system.
Well, yeah, so they should have an idea. I'm in an interesting situation with my supervisor, but so if you should know the quarterly awards are a thing, you should put yourself in for them if they don't come and ask you that.
I mean, throughout the Air Force, it depends on your career field. If you're in a very military-dense career field, then you're going to have a flight commander that's, a captain or a major or a first lieutenant, and they're going to know what's going on. Sometimes, especially in the program management area, it's a little more civilian heavy, and they are just, some of them are not quite as up to speed on how to write OPR bullets and how to write a quarterly awards package in that Air Force format. So I think what Jay's trying to say is just, you're the one that's in charge of your career. So when your OPR's a month or two out, draft it up yourself and give it to them and say, this is what I did. Just kind of take the onus on yourself to just control your destiny, especially if you come up to, a supervisor that's not quite as up to speed. Hopefully you're not presented with that scenario, but I have written 5 of my 6 OPRs.
I've written all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll find that on the heavy military jobs too. And we would like to think that it's a lot different, but even in just squadrons with nothing but active duty officers, there's going to be times where you're going to want to kind of put yourself out there and say to your flight commander, just mention, hey, I'm volunteering here or whatever. I've accomplished this. I did this. And then they'll catch on. But OPRs, and we'll talk about it in class and stuff, but OPRs, a lot of times you're going to have to write it yourself.
One of the things that I do, and it's not because I think I'm worthy of it, just because it's a good practice, I will submit a quarterly awards package for myself every quarter, just because it's a really good practice for writing bullets. And it's a really good way to keep track of what you've done that quarter. Some of the things that don't necessarily go on your OPR are things, especially once you're getting higher in rank, things like community service are not necessarily job related, so it's harder to capture those on your OPR. So having a quarterly awards package, and when I say package, I just mean one sheet, you're just filling out all the bullets on it. It's good to do that. It's good to get into practice, and then whenever you are writing an OPR, it's nice to combine some of those into one nice bullet and say, hey, this is what I did. This is how we captured it.
It's not being selfish or bragging. You're just looking out for yourself because the other people don't always look out for you. If you work with a lot of civilians around us.
The same thing with the military. You need to look out for yourself. Not saying that is done for everything, but you need to make sure you got what's important and what's not.
Introduce ourselves and take a tiny bit of our background so you know what you have experience-wise to work with here. Stephen Sylvester, I am an OSU grad. I graduated in 90-something, commissioned in 90-something else. Before most of you were much more than like 3 or 4 years old, maybe. So left here, went to Vance, pilot training at Vance, stayed at Vance as an instructor pilot on the T-37, which used to be what the T-6 is now, okay? So first aircraft at pilot training. Did that for 3 years and then went to C-17s. Charleston, did an air mobility liaison, vehicle 10 pounds, so a little bit of time at the Army school. Staff out at Nellis, staff in the desert for a year working for General Goldfein when he was the 3-star in charge of the air war. And then Dover for C-17s before coming back to Advance. Now on what may well be my last assignment there. Fortunately, I'm a T6 Squadron Commander, one of the two that we have at Advance. So that's me.
My name is Kevin LaRue. I went to the Air Force Academy, graduated in 2010 out of there, then went to advanced pilot training. Did advanced pilot training, T6, T1s there, and then C-17s out of Charleston Air Force Base, South Carolina for about 4 years. And then now back as an instructor in the T6 and the 33rd Advanced. So.
I'm Jimmy Arnold. I'm from Altus, Oklahoma. Any Southwest Oklahoma people? No, that's right. Okay. I figured to go anyway, I wouldn't admit that either. Anyway, they were state champs last year, by the way. Still bad. 5A. Right. So anyway, went to Oklahoma State, graduated in 2006. I went to pilot training advance, graduated there, went to C-17s at Hickam in Hawaii. Out of there, I did MC-12s at Afghanistan and Kandahar, and then I did C-17s at Dover, Delaware. Now I'm flying the T1 at Advance.
Kyle Parker, graduated from Oklahoma State in 2013, went to Advance, T1, then I went back as an instructor for T1s, been there ever since.
Brad Elliott, went to the Civil on the East Coast, and then pilot training in Advance. T6s, T38s there, back as a T6 instructor, and just got my newest assignment F-16s to is next, so waiting on that.
Hey guys, I'm Chris Johnson. Did T-34 course down in Pensacola first before I finished up at T1's Advanced. After that, flew KC-10s out of Travis Air Force Base, doing air refueling for about 3.5 years before coming back here as a T1 instructor. Been here for about a year and a half.
Wilson Sperano, went to Texas A&M, came up to Advance, went through the T1 and sticking around and flying that.
So we've got a fair number of FAPEs and mostly mobility background with the exception of Brett down there who's headed off the F-16 shortly. So what can we answer for you? Because this is all about you, of course.
So how often do you deploy in 17s?
Depends on the base you're at.
Probably Charleston's the best.
So Charleston, when I got there, we were on a 4-month rotation. So each squadron would be gone for 4 months as an entire squadron, and then they would prep up and send out the next squadron. It just kept going like that. Unfortunately, the same 2 squadrons typically got tagged for the Christmas on an alternating basis based off of that rotation. So we now follow the 135 construct for deployments, which is we send a crew out, a couple crews from each squadron out for about 2.5 months, and then they come back. The reason why we didn't want to go towards that construct was the fact that our missions are a little bit more than just taking off from one location, air refueling, and then coming back and landing at the same location. So crew complement, like what type of instructors, evaluators, and things like that you have downrange is a huge deal when you're dealing with a small dirt strip. Yes, we're all qualified, but some are more proficient than others at things like that.
So in that construct, you're probably going for 2.5 months, and you might do that only once a year. But when you're not deployed, you're still flying trips in the heavy world. Of course, you're still gone. As we've talked about with those groups, the average co-pilot when you're young is probably on the road. Deployments are not. You're probably on the road about 180 to 220 days a year. The older you get, the more additional duty kind of stuff you have outside of flying, the less often you're gone because you got more desk work kind of stuff until you get to be old like me and you never get to fly.
So follow up to that, is it true then that heavies don't deploy as much as fighter guys, or does it really still just depend on the airframe?
It depends on the airframe. We don't, C-17 kind of deployed for longer chunks. C-17s and C-130s, at least in the older days, would go for 4 C-130s, maybe even as much as 6-month chunks, much more like a fighter unit would. The tankers typically go out for like 2 months at a time, and then they're home for 2 or 3 months, and then 2 months again. And they fly long missions in the orbits, So they time out, so they can't stay out on a deployment for a long period of time, because after a couple of months, they can't fly anymore for a little while until they burn off some of those hours. So it just depends a little bit on the airframe. But the Hercs actually are pretty much employed much more like a fighter, because it takes so long for them to get across the pond and get anywhere in the world. It may take 4 or 5 days just to get to the desert from the States. So they're more employed like that. But the bigger difference, I think, is that the home station time, whereas in the fighter community, if you're not deployed, you're basically flying training lines. Now, you may go TUI to go to an exercise here, there, or Wanyana, so they're not always home, but they're flying training lines all the time, whereas when we're at a home station, you might fly a training line once a week, but you'll also go on trips once or twice at least a month. So just, it very much depends on the airframe.
I just want to caveat that too with like from the C-17 world. Although we're not like we may be forward to deploy to a location, flying in out of the Middle East, and then we may come back and we'll fly right back to that location out of home station. So it's not like once we're back home station, we're not touching the Middle East. Like that's still the primary bread and butter, is just going back and forth to the same place, even though we were just there.
Anything else from you guys?
Pretty much it. Like I said, I was KC-10, so we get to the 2 months of deployed and about 2 or 3 months home before going back in, especially as a co-pilot. So you end up with about the same amount of time deployed in a year as the guys who would do the 4 to 6 month deployments. You just spread it out over the whole year versus doing it in one big chunk. The nice part about the KC-10, especially while I was there, was that they prog out the KC-10 deployments for the entire year on January 1st. So come January 1st, you know exactly when you're going to go for the whole year. And if you've got big major events like if you're planning on getting married, or you got a kid that's on the way, or anything like that, graduations, things you're trying to make for family members, you can try to maneuver your schedule to make those events and then still support the mission.
Is it hard starting a family, like being gone 200 whatever days out of the year?
It's easy starting. Just be real honest. It's easy. The Air Force, you're taking care of your family with the presence, that can be more challenging.
The Air Force guarantees you can be there for the conception of the birth, but not necessarily both.
Don't look so good.
Took a long to piece that together.
To your point, I mean, the reality is you're signing on a dotted line to serve, and it is not as easy as your civilian counterparts that work a 9 to 5 and are home every night. It's obviously not impossible, because most dudes end up with, and ladies end up with families, and the ladies find time to not just raise but have children, but it is more impact obviously than a job on the outside a lot of times. I think the Air Force is working hard to make some of that better. Right? You see now paternity leave and pretty extended amounts of maternity leave associated with having children and things like that, to try to, and the new program where you can basically hit time out on your career for, I don't remember how long, like 3 years. 3 years, so it is, yeah. So you can go, hey, I'm a new captain, and I have 4 more years on my commitment, or whatever it may be, and go, you know what, I want to have a family and have time to be with my child while they're young. Time out. All things stop, right? Pay stops, but all things stop. And you just go away and do whatever you want for a while, and then come back, and it's like, okay, resume and finish out the rest. So that's a new thing that's out there, but we're trying as an enterprise to get better.
Is that just for females, or is that for males too?
It's for everybody.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you put in your application and you tell them what it is you want to do. So like that internship at Google, or like go work for some other Fortune 500 or whatever it is you want to do, or like go get a master's, PhD. So they want to see it like a somewhat valid reason, but some people are doing it for family and they're getting it approved as well. So.
What else? Sorry, it's embarrassing.
Do you guys have any advice for pilot training?
Study. I think, like one of the guys asked in the previous session about getting prior flight experience and getting like a prior pilot's license and things like that. And the consensus we kind of came to was that if it's feasible for you to monetarily go do that, then sure, you know, like the more experience you have, the better. But if it's gonna impact you in any way, it's not worth it, because we get guys that have, you know, regional jet experience and then guys that have no flight experience, and they all make it through the pilot training pipeline. So it's really about what you do when you get there. So studying and chair flying are the two biggest things that are gonna help you out.
Don't say all. All make it once we get them to you. But
That's
don't
fair.
all make it to pilot training. But we get most people through the program.
Yeah, I would say just you know, be open-minded, be a team player, and have patience. So what I mean by patience is just have patience that the process is going to work, right? So you're not going to get there day one and know how to fly, right? It's just going to be slow. And that's one thing I struggled with is a lot of people around you are going to talk a big game, so you're going to think you're the only one not grasping it, right? But everyone's struggling together. So having that patience to, and it took me a long time to learn that. Every new plane, I'm like, man, I'm not getting it. But having that patience, just that the process will work, and you'll continue to improve.
Do y'all see the guys coming in from IFT have a considerable advantage over those who don't? Over those who say come in with just like a pro pilot's license? Or do you get any people who've done both?
I guess what everybody would want to IFT now, is that
I think now the IFT has changed so much that there's not a whole lot of difference. To be honest, if I had two students sitting there and flew with both of them, I probably couldn't tell you, based on what they've shown me in T6s, who went where. And I think the average now, it doesn't really matter as much. The biggest difference that I've seen is like students just having a PPL and then going to the Air Force, maybe a slight leg up for, like we talked about earlier, like a 3-week period. But the big difference is between, like, we've had guys that come through with like 4,000 hours of like commercial time. Those guys, it's like you tell them what we're gonna go do and you can just sit back and watch it because they're gonna fly as good as you do. But that is what gives them the huge advantage versus just somebody with like a few hours getting a PBL, because you're going to quickly get overwhelmed once you get into pilot training as well with everyone else.
And we do that to you intentionally, right? We're trying to make it miserable for a little while. We want you to struggle as a bit of a motivational tool. Plus, you know, we got to overwhelm you on the ground so that when you're solo in the aircraft and you have an emergency, that you're prepared to handle that stress and handle that situation. And if I haven't put you under that stress artificially on the ground, then you won't know whether you're going to be able to handle it or not until you're in that situation. That's obviously not the time to find out that you're not prepared. So.
What about life like after UPT, like when you hit that captain major point, like training wise, studying, like how much time a week would you spend, you know, going back?
It never ends. I mean, there's so much information that you forget more than you retain. So there's different curriculum like transition, navigation, formation, and you're in any one of those for about 1 to 2 months. So you'd be focusing on that, and then you'll have to switch right away. And you almost say brain dumped it, but you're just not as proficient. So you have to get back in the books and look it up, and it's just constantly looking stuff up. It's never like you just walk out the door and you're like, oh, I know everything there is. It's constant study, but like you mentioned, with all the other stuff going on, that all of us would probably admit we probably don't get to brush up as much as we would like to be as proficient as we would like.
For the Vegas, what's something that you like and don't like about jumping right to being an instructor?
First, did y'all volunteer for FAVE or did y'all?
It was in my top 24.
You can request to be a FAVE, right? Because that's something I've been thinking a lot about. You can request that, right?
Well, yeah, you can. If you're not near the top half of the class, you're probably not going to fake you.
But I think if you want to FAVE, most people will rank you pretty high in their peer.
Typically, there are not a ton of guys coming out saying, I really want to fake, right? But it depends.
So what's some things you like knowing about it?
Yeah, so I would say for me, going 38s, my end goal out of 38s, I wanted A10s to fly that. And so I would rank like my fighters that I wanted to fly, and then I had like T-38 FAPE and then T-6 FAPE, because it's like, well, if I don't get a fighter this shot, if I can FAPE, then I'll get a second shot at it pretty much. And in 3 years, and now I get to go fly the F-16. So it worked out, and so it wasn't like number one, but it was a better alternative than going and flying some of the other planes. And so I really like, it's awesome being able to teach students how to fly, some more so than others. But it is awesome every day when you take off and get the gear in the well, and then you're like, cool, I get to freaking go fly a $4 million aircraft and get paid to do it. So it's a pretty sweet gig. Some of the other bad parts of it is that first, like I came back as a FAPE, and now I was a second lieutenant, so I'm teaching other second lieutenants, and so it's a little bit awkward at times with the rank, but you usually students learn very quickly that you know way more than they do, so they should be quiet. But like I gave a major a check ride, so that was somewhat awkward. He was a previous flight doc, getting his wings, so that was kind of weird. But also you go back into competition with all your other FAPEs, so it's like going through UPT all over again, except it's 3 years long.
So I'm what we call an old school FAPE, so I was a FAPE the first time around, right? I would say, in my personal opinion, and I know a lot of guys that would agree with me, being a UPT instructor, no matter whether it's your first assignment or not, is one of, if not the most rewarding jobs that you will do as a flyer in your career if you do it. It is especially, I personally think, phase 2, which is what we do T6s, right? The first time the students fly is even more so, because you really are, when they come in the door, they're pedestrians. They do not, generally speaking, have any real significant flight time. They don't know how to fly. And by the time they leave us, stick and throttle kind of stuff, they're a pilot. These guys are going to take them and make them refine their knowledge in the T1 or the 38, or refine their ability to fly in a certain way, and make them much better. But they are, by most people's standards, a pilot by the time they leave T6s. So that is pretty darn cool to take somebody, and not very many people show up and go like, yeah, 6 months ago I decided I think I'd try out this flying thing. That doesn't happen, right? It's folks that have been dreaming about this for years, if not decades. So to see that dream made a reality for them and held that long is pretty darn cool. That's what I think is the great thing about our job. And while I did awesome stuff in the C-17, and I got to see a lot of the world, and it was pretty cool, and it was very rewarding stuff there too, this is the most rewarding. What else?
So we talk about sometimes, like if you go into a certain career, you do go to like a special duty like this, it might impact on your career, like your career progression later on. Does being a FAPE, does that impact your career later on at like 16, 18, 20 year mark?
No, so I think the FAPE impact on your career is a little bit more significant if you're headed to fighters, potentially, than it is to go into heavies. There's goods and bads, right? You, by comparison to a new co-pilot or a new wingman in one of those worlds that's straight out of UPT, you're far more proficient, competent at coming out after being a FAPE, because you have 1,000+ hours of time with air under your butt. All right. That being said, especially for the fighter guys, where in the fighter community, being a weapons officer, going to weapons school is so vitally important if you want to be a commander in that world. It's not so much in the heavy world, but you're at a distinct disadvantage because you're starting later in your career into that world to try to get to weapons school. It's not impossible, but it is much harder to demonstrate that you are that top tier guy in your weapons system fast enough to still make the window to get picked up for weapons school. So it's probably a little bit more of a disadvantage for a guy like Fred that's going to go fly a fighter. All But there, like I said, he'll also have the benefit of a lot of other things that will serve him well in his career as far as the flying piece. He will do better, most likely on day 1 through whatever, because of his time flying. And he'll be more confident because he's flown with hundreds of kids trying to kill him every day. So, any other thoughts on the impacts, guys?
Yeah, the biggest thing is so when I go to like introduction to fighter fundamental, to go back and fly the T-38 or to go to F-16 training, I'll be in there with a bunch of people that probably students that I've taught, right? So I'm in there with them, but they don't have all the hours and the 3 years worth of flying experience that I have. So I'll be starting out with them, but I will rapidly surpass them in how fast I upgrade. So I mean, general loss for the fake, so it works out.
The long-term stuff you're talking about is very, very, and coming back to UPT as an instructor, if you don't fake, is just part of a natural career progression. You're gonna do, typically, we talk about your first 3 assignments post-pilot training. Ideally, you're gonna do 2 MWS major weapon system assignments and 1 other, whether it's going back to the schoolhouse for the MWS, or which is an AETC assignment, or coming to a white jet, or going and doing something like a C-21 or one of these one-off kind of things as your other. So that's part of a normal career progression for a flyer. It's not detrimental.
All right, thank you all.
We'll give a quick introduction on everybody. Glad that you're willing to play along.
Absolutely, that's why you're here.
So I'm Tony Anderson. I'm a logistics readiness officer. We move people and stuff around the world. That's basically our claim to fame. Nobody can do anything unless we get it. I've been stationed at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska. I did some time in Texas at Lackland Air Force Base, and then the Army Base Fort St. Houston. Spent a year over in the UAE, where Dubai is, if anybody's heard of that cool city. Then down at Tinker for about a year now, doing a career broadening program. Got a little bit of experience in the language-enabled airman program. So if you're curious how the language thing works in the Air Force, I can extrapolate a little bit on that. What did I miss? What are the other introductory parts? I messed this up. School. Oh yeah, I'm an ROTC grad. I came in with a Spanish language and culture degree with a minor in computer science. Not related to logistics at all. So.
All right. Captain Joel Liddy, came in through ROTC, the double E degree. It's my first assignment at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, doing IT type positions for software systems for the Air Force. Picked up for a career broadening tour into Intel, so it's about 8 months after Wright-Pat's at Goodfellow Air Force Base in Texas, doing the Intel school. From there, I went to Osan Air Base in Korea, did 2 years of space intel out there. And then from Korea to Oklahoma City at Tinker to do the local recruiting squadron. So for 2.5 years, I helped helped recruit enlisted sessions and officer sessions through OTS. And then recently this summer, I switched over to the engineering side again, and now I'm in the B1, B2 program office as an engineer there.
I'm Shelley Spryer. I'm a public affairs officer at Vance Air Force Base. I commissioned from ROTC at Baylor, and I have a political science degree with a minor in rhetoric and argumentation. It's kind of related to PA. I spent 2 years at Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington, and now I'm here. You guys look familiar because I was here in January for RAP, and now I'm here dual military, so I can speak a little bit about that too. Public affairs in a nutshell, we work directly for the wing commander or whoever, base commander, doing community engagement, media relations, and command information. So anything that shares the Air Force story or the base story, we deal with that and getting information out and getting information in. Not intel-wise, but I can go into more specifics during your questions.
Classified, unclassified.
Yeah, right. I make sure we don't talk about the classified stuff.
So, my name is Lieutenant Jorge Roman. I'm also a ROTC grad. I'm from San Juan, Puerto Rico. My major is in psychology, not too fancy. So, basically what we do as a personnel officers, which is the career field line, 38 Papa, is pretty much manpower, personnel, and services. So we take care of the people, families, retirees, veterans, from cradle to grave, pretty much. So when you first go to the Air Force and you report into installation and you get you get to the installation and you get accepted to there until you depart the Air Force, retire, or you die, and then you need to perform the funeral services. That's pretty much it. Pretty great. In a nutshell, there's a lot more, but
Funeral services is actually a function. He wasn't
Right,
there.
he's not there.
All right, what do you guys have?
questions?
What did you say your major was?
Mine?
Yes.
Political science.
That
The
was.
minor was rhetoric and argumentation.
So you went to school to learn how to argue?
More of the background of it.
Ah.
We did a lot of the historical,
Okay.
reading speeches and things
Studied
like that.
like
So
other
yeah,
people
I
are.
wanted to go to law school when I joined, and I decided I'd rather join active duty first and then maybe consider law school later. So that's why it's more legal-ish.
What are you guys curious about? You're the POC, right? You're on board. What are you wondering about?
Lieutenant life, it doesn't even have to be like very specific.
Can you talk about the dual military?
Yes. Any specific questions?
Just general
Okay,
overview.
so I'll give you like our timeline. We met in college. We actually met at field training, which is kind of good. We didn't date there.
Why not?
And so we started dating. 2 months we filled out our dream sheet. We kind of knew that it was going to be serious and we really liked each other. But I was like, I'm not putting. He was coming to Vance. He knew that for a pilot slot. And I was like, I'm not putting Tinker just to be close to a guy, And so, which it could have worked out, and now I kind of wish I would have. But anyway, so we filled that out. I put Washington, and so I got Washington. He was at Vance. Our relationship progressed. We ended up getting engaged while I was in Washington, and then we got legally married before our wedding, because the Air Force won't look at moving you until you're legally married. And I'm not saying accelerate that process unless you know it's going to be legit, but. We did that, and so we were married for a year before I got an assignment to Vance, and that's just needs of the Air Force. Like they'll try, they do what they can, but there was only one lieutenant authorization at Vance for PA, and so it just worked out that the lieutenant there had left, and so I got to come in there a little bit later than I'd hoped, but they got it to work out. There were other opportunities I was exploring for that. I could have been an exec at Vance, and they could have moved me for that, and then I could have gone into the PA field once it opened up. But they do try to prioritize you, and he can talk about that too, his assignments and things like that. But it sucks. I told the other group, don't accelerate something that maybe isn't going to happen, or like don't get married just so that you can live together unless you're certain that you're going to be together and that you really want to be married. Because if you're long distance, you're going to stay together or you're not, and either the long distance part shouldn't be the determining factor. So it was hard, but now we're together and it worked out. And the Air Force will try. Basically, that's the long story short. They'll try.
So expanding a little bit about that, AFPC is the one who determines the assignment. And how do you voice that to AFPC? Well, the Air Force has a tool, it's called AMP. As a personnel officer, I kind of oversee that program, making sure that not only myself, my people, also my peers know how to use AMP and how to voice their concerns. How it's done for career broadening, it's done for joint spouse consideration. It's also for commander requests, but that's a little bit more complicated. So we were talking to the other groups. It's always good to have a personnel officer, or as a matter of fact, any kind of network. So now that you are, scheduled to commission into the Air Force, make sure that you know the people that you're around, get contact information, get your network, because the Air Force is pretty small. There's a very high chance you guys will see each other eventually. I actually commissioned in, like I said, Puerto Rico, and I had a friend that commissioned also in Puerto Rico, but in another detachment, and we ended up both in Tinker. So that's kind of cool, see another peer that commissioned in the same year group. So joint spouse consideration is AFPC. It's a program that having a little bit of knowledge of how to effectively tailor your assignment towards joint spouse consideration. That's something personnel officers can help out as well.
I will say, do what makes you happy. If your career is more important to you, pick your career. If your relationship is, pick your relationship. They'll follow. But for me, it was my relationship. And the other side of that is really to speak to your supervisors. Speak now. If you're at that point now in your life, let your cadre know that that's what you want to do, and they're going to try to work with you, even if you aren't legally married. They'll try. we had people tell us to go get married. We'd been together for like 3 months, which is like, okay, we're not gonna rush it, but we'll think about it. Right. But we knew at 2 months.
So,
That's right, Chris?
other questions? Other questions? What do we have?
The language program you're talking about, can you talk about that a little bit more?
Sure, absolutely. So anybody that's interested or already has a background in languages, you start usually, when you're coming in initially, there's the Language Enabled Airman program. Right. So just to clarify though, there's no officer linguist position. Those don't exist. Those are enlisted positions. So if your hope was to try and get in and be a linguist for your career, it's not going to happen. But using the Language Enabled Airman program, you can use that as a gateway or preparatory program to get to whenever you're a captain. They have these other things called Regional Affairs and Political Affairs Specialists. And that's when you get to break in and really use the language piece. So Regional Affairs Specialist turns into a situation where you go off for a little bit of training and then you alternate assignments back and forth, where you do some regional-based advising based on whatever language specialty that you have. Then you go back to your normal career field, and then you swap back and forth, alternating assignments, so that way you can maintain the proficiency as well as going on the other side of maintaining your job proficiency. But the big part about the Language Enabled Airman program that I forgot to mention the other ones is it builds up in a couple of different categories, not only in terms of your ability to use the language, but it also focuses on building the culture part of it, and so they do that by sending you to that region. So if you're specializing in Russian, you'll go to Russian-speaking countries. If you're specializing in Chinese, you'll go to Chinese-speaking areas sometimes. We don't like China that much, but we try to we can. I went to Costa Rica for a month for Spanish, for instance. So opportunities abound for different things that may not be directly in your career field area, and languages is one of them.
So I have a psychology background. I applied for LEAP as a second lieutenant. So you guys have the chance that you can apply as X-400. When you're scheduled to commission, you can apply. So my advice, do you know a language, try it. Why not? The only thing that you will never know for certain is things that you don't try. Or if you don't have a chance to apply now, then consider while you're a second lieutenant, they also take you into good consideration since you just graduated, and then you have a little bit of more experience. So in my case, it's Spanish as well, and I happen to have a 3.3 in the OPT or language score that they use for the LEAP program. But yeah, we can talk about that more later. But it's a great program out there to immerse into different cultures.
Certain languages will pay you more money too.
Definitely.
And if you don't know it now, there are opportunities to go and learn it.
Yes.
And then they'll pay for that. So.
What else we got? Who already knows their job?
What kind of jobs do you have to start with here?
Space ops?
Space ops. Nukes.
Finance.
Pilot.
Pilot?
Pilot.
Oh, pilot. Sorry, I thought you said. Was there one other one back here?
Is there a rest back here? Pilot?
Engineer. Cyrus just dropped on Monday.
It's awesome.
Yeah, sweet, congrats.
And everybody else is still waiting.
5 years.
So
Next year we'll know.
Victory lap.
Absolutely.
So if you have questions in those functional areas too, we can, based on whatever experience we have, and we have friends that have done some of these too, you can certainly elaborate on some of those. Or if you're curious about how the Air Force works in general, you can do it on there.
What were some of the things you guys, like some of the mistakes you made as a second lieutenant, or like things you wish you knew going in?
I'll start down that way.
Yeah, he was ready.
I know that's probably the right time to figure out. But
So I would say my biggest mistake I've yet to do thousands as a second lieutenant is that having fear to ask questions. As I graduated ROTC, you're in that high note. You're, oh my God, I just commissioned. I just want to get this started, and then you think you know everything. And I got this. I'm a leader. I know what this is all about. Big mistake. So I found myself in a position that you need to trust your people. You need to trust your airmen. You take care of them, and they will take care of the mission. So my biggest mistake, I will sum it up in that, is just being afraid of asking a question. How do I do this? How do I do that? Maybe because it was my own bias. Okay, what is going to think my tech sergeant, my ACOIC? What is my tech sergeant going to think about me if I ask him questions? Well, they'll, and I think they will agree. They know you're a second lieutenant. They know that you don't know the technical knowledge that obviously they have developed through the course of years. So don't be afraid. Ask questions. Your career will depend on how many questions you ask that are assertive. So make sure that you ask all you can while you can, because once you've been captain, there's no way back. There's no excuse. There's no saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm a second lieutenant. I didn't know." Because by the time you make captain, you're expected to not only be technically proficient in some areas, but also to be able to lead and take care of your people fully mission capable. So take advantage of that.
I'm still learning. I can't think of one big mistake that I've made yet. I mean, I'm sure I've done some things, but I learned really quickly that I needed to ask questions and really rely on my enlisted and my senior NCOs. Something that I see from other CGOs, though, is getting too involved. And, like, we're trying to learn the job, too. So it's nice to, oh, yeah, I don't normally take photos, but can I go out and take photos, whatever. But don't hinder your airmen from doing that. Because they know more than you do. So you don't need to micromanage at all. Sometimes it's hard not to because you want to be involved, but you don't need to. So that was something that I tried to be aware of.
Mine's kind of two-part, I guess, that both tie into the same thing at the end, and that's that although there is a plan, you got to remember that you have to have faith in that plan too, and you also have to have faith in your leaders. And so the first part of it was I was going to wear one of those cool flight suits whenever I was in our ROTC. I got selected and everything was awesome, and then a couple months before I went in, something happened and come away. Right? And so now I'm no longer wearing that thing, and I got this other job, and I was really jaded whenever I came into the Air Force. I tried really hard for about 2 years to try and cross-train, and then realized that I knew nothing about the career field I was going into. And the Air Force is fairly intelligent. They put me somewhere where they knew I could excel if I was just patient, and I waited through it. Go a few years down the road, I'm still in the career field. I'm asked to do certain things, and so I tried to excel at my job. And then another set of dark days happened where I was working for someone, and I had a senior member of my command tell me they needed a fall guy because some things that I had found were going to paint a really bad picture on some people and talking potential legal trouble. And they separated themselves from the paperwork trail and looked at me and said, "Sorry I have to do this to you, but I need to be able to turn around and say, hey, maybe my captain didn't see this all the way through." And then remembering that sometimes you're going to have a few bad moments, but things can turn around. The end of that assignment actually turned out very well for me. But those days in the beginning, having to work with that commander and work through it, I had to get to a point where he and I could see eye to eye, work through and find a better solution. But the start of that conversation was, I'm going to stay in because I need to make my bird. But you, Captain, you just started. You can go find another career. But there is time to recover, and you have to have faith in that. You have to have faith in the fact that you can build a relationship over time with these people. And sometimes what they say isn't always what they mean. So have the patience to go back and realize that sometimes you don't get what you wanted, and sometimes people aren't going to tell you what you want to hear. But it can come back around. Everything is recoverable.
Yeah, I think something that my AFROTC Detachment did a good job of preparing us for was the fact that your degree, you're not going to be working on your degree every day of the week, whatever, when you're on active duty, and especially so for engineers. Like I'm a double E. It took me 7 years to fill a double E job in the Air Force. The first 7 years I was in, I didn't do double E work, right? But other detachment, I was very surprised when I was on active duty. So it seemed as if nobody else had told anybody that secret. Because there were plenty of my peers in engineering, especially that were disgruntled with the work they were doing, and they would punch at the 4-year mark, punch at the 5-year mark, which is fine. They serve their country. They should be thankful for that. But they got out on bad terms because they had a wildly inaccurate expectation of what they were going to be doing. And so the way, when I was in the recruiting squadron, and I interviewed the OTS candidates that we would have in the squadron, I'd always tell them that you're an officer first, your AFSC second, and then for the engineers, I would tell them, well, you're whatever flavor of engineering third. So if you have that mindset, you're never going to be disappointed by your career field or your position, your DCS assignment, because just like Tony said, he was coming to expect you to be a pilot, right? Well, that didn't happen. okay, well, but if he had the attitude of, well, I'm an officer first, so that's cool. I don't have to be a pilot to be an officer, right? So, he took that route and he had that mentality. Now he's in, he's happy, and so, but, like I said, so I think, I'm not sure how much that gets, brought up or whatever, but, having the degree is the important part. Having passion for what you do is another important part. What kind of engineer are you, Back?
Astronaut.
Okay, so, all right, well, okay, so, yeah, it's important to have, passions, and so when you get into the Air Force, don't just be known as, oh, well, that's Lieutenant so-and-so, he's a great engineer. That's going to get you far, but won't get you as far as, oh, hey, it's Lieutenant so-and-so. Yeah, he's a great engineer, but he's also a great thinker. He's great this, he's a great that. He's a great writer, he's a great, mentor, he's a great leader, he's a great, you don't want to be just a public, just a political science, person, or a, mechanical engineering, or a economics, person. So that's a, looking back on it, I didn't make any mistakes with lieutenants, so.
Some people are perfect.
Are we on time?
Good question.
We're trying to rush this out.
Are we good on time?
You're good so far.
Oh, okay.
Do about an half more.
Like when you see people at the church.
So you were a fall guy for Lieutenant Colonel?
Yeah.
And did they throw you under the bus to throw you under the bus? Or did it be like, hey, look, this is going to suck, but you can recover from this within the Air Force? Or you can rebound, you're young enough that you can develop a career outside the Air Force and just kind of...
Good question. So he didn't execute, which is the important thing. Because what happened in the beginning was when he gave me that message, I went out and I consorted with some folks that I consider mentors. Right? So I talked to a couple of people and said, hey, this is the message I just got. These are the words they used. Help me out. I don't know how to handle this situation. And so kind of after working through that, I was able to go back in and have a conversation with that individual. And then over the course of the next few weeks, we're able to kind of get to a set of equal terms. Because the scenario was where when the things that had been uncovered, basically found out that people weren't getting paid, people weren't getting legal entitlements that they were supposed to be getting. And in our world, when people start not getting things that are legal requirements, that's a bad thing. Commanders can lose their jobs for them. And so by distancing themselves, they were able to put a cushion to make it look like it wasn't that bad, right? That somebody else had thought. But the mentality going into that was that, hey, if he created that cushion, I can separate, I'm young, I can find some other career, right? I can go somewhere else. But the positive part of that is through the mentorship that I had with some other folks, I was able to remember that sometimes people don't hear things the way that they're meant to be heard, right? Maybe sometimes people don't convey the message they meant to convey. And so not only did I go back and talk to that individual, but I had some senior mentors went back and also talked to them to help convey the right message. And so at the end of it, like I said, it turned out very well. But it took us probably a month and a half finally to get to that point to where he and I can be in the same room and be comfortable with each other. Because I basically lost all faith in that member of my command. But then now I seek him out now for other guidance and counsel as we've gotten to that level of rapport again. So it's remember that sometimes even senior leaders make mistakes. And sometimes if you get the right message back to them, they can recover from that just like you can.
Communication. I will expand a little bit on that same topic. So I work in an area where everything needs to match to perfection. I oversee requirements, I oversee realignments, I oversee assignments and separations from the Air Force. So if you don't communicate your expectations to your people, they won't be able to meet your goal or the goal of the group. If you don't communicate stuff up, something went wrong or some expectations were not met, then you start to default, and then you as a leader get yourself into trouble. So be able to be honest, communicate your stuff, and establish rapport with the people you work with. That will get you forward.